Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today is a very special episode because it's the last show for the Halloween month of October on Splat from the Past. And so we are going out with a bang. We're going to be interviewing a legendary horror director, a very underrated one at that, Jack Sholder, the director of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. He also directed Alone in the Dark and The Hidden, and he even did a TV Movie of the Week reboot of The Omen back in the 90s. And I'm having him on the show today, and I'm pretty excited. It's going to be friggin' awesome. Oh my God, yes. A legend like Jack Sholder. I got so much to ask him about certain stuff he did. He even also was I'm trying to remember what is he. He was an editor on The Burning, which was also Harvey Weinstein's first movie as a producer, and one of Tom Savini's early movies that he did in Hollywood after Dawn of the Dead. So I'm going to ask him about working on those. So yeah, here is my interview with Jack Sholder. Hi, Jack.
Hey, yeah, how are you?
I am great. How are you, sir?
Good.
That is great. Thank you so much for taking the time on Halloween. I've always loved your movies, and this is just an honor. Thank you so much.
Oh, pleasure.
Yeah. So going back to the beginning, did you fall in love with film early on?
Actually, well, yes and no. I mean, I always liked film. I mean, who doesn't,
Yeah.
But I was never thought of it as a career. I actually wanted to be a writer, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then at a certain point, I decided that I didn't want to be a writer, and I've always sort of known what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if I didn't want to do one thing, then I found something else I wanted to do. And so I had a girlfriend who was interested in film, and so started to see some films with her, and really loved it, and thought, hey, this is something I'd really like to do. That's when I devoted my energy to becoming a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the first movie you ever saw?
I remember the first movie that I remember, which was the earliest film that I can remember was The Wizard of Oz, which scared the crap out of me. When they poured the water on the witch and she melted.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something about that film that's very nightmarish.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There were just images that are kind of disturbing in that film.
Oh yeah, the witch in the hourglass. That scared me. That scared my father when he was a kid.
There's a lot of stuff that gets into some really kind of archetypal sort of images that I think just resonate. I think that's part of its power. Most people think of it as a pretty benign movie, but I think part of its power is that it has this kind of disturbing aspect to it.
Yeah. Well,
and, flying monkeys and
yeah.
Lots of other stuff that's kind of out there.
Yeah, the book was a little bit darker. They kind of made it a little bit more lighthearted for the film, but it still has that disturbing edge to it. You are right about that.
Yeah. So that was really the first film that I remember seeing.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite movie of all time?
Oh well, that's a hard one. I mean, I say Touch of Evil, but if I could only watch one, just probably because I probably stole more from Touch of Evil than anything else. Just the style of the film. I don't know. you know, I'd really have to make a 10 best list. You know, because it'd be hard to really pin it down. But certainly, something by Hitchcock for sure. And there's probably
Mm-hmm.
6 or 7 that could easily put on that list. I mean, Citizen Kane, of course. But I love Wells. I mean, The Searchers is a great movie. 8.5.
Yeah.
For sure. Probably Jules and Jim. Something by Godard. Children of Paradise. Did you ever see that one?
Children of Paradise.
Children of Paradise.
Who's in it?
Yeah. It's a French movie. It's about theater people in the end of the 19th century in Paris, and it's like a 3-hour movie, and it's one of the great masterpieces of cinema.
I'll check it out. I haven't seen it.
It's an incredible film. I mean, none of my favorite films are horror films.
Really?
I mean, Psycho's favorite film.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Exorcist is a favorite film. I only saw it once. I was too scared to see it again. So, but that was really a good one.
Yeah. Did you go to film school?
Nope. No, I got a degree in English. When I was in college, they didn't have film schools.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, USC and UCLA and NYU, and that was it. I mean, there were no film programs. There was no such thing as film studies. There was none of that. So, I might have studied film if they'd had it, but maybe not. But I studied English instead, and actually, I'm really glad I did, because I got to read everything that Shakespeare wrote, and I got to read all the great novels, 18th, 19th, 20th century, all the great plays, and that helped me enormously to become a good filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
The more you know about stuff that's not film, the better filmmaker you will be.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, look at all the guys who have come since the 90s. They basically didn't know anything, and they just reinvented independent film.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, nobody taught me anything. Actually, nobody taught me anything in school. I mean, there are a lot of people that I learned a lot from, but I sort of learned on the job, so to speak. I just learned by doing it,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of the way people used to learn how to do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you got to be the editor on The Burning.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was something where actually I learned a lot from working on that movie. Because I'd certainly seen my share of horror films. Invasion of the Body Snatchers is another real favorite of mine, actually. Fantastic movie.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The original one, although the remake is also really good, but I mean the original one, Don Siegel's an amazing director.
Yeah.
I've always admired his work. What was that? I think I got off the topic. You had asked me a question.
Oh yeah. How did you get hired to edit The Burning?
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I was living in New York, and I was, I'd been working as an editor,
Mm-hmm.
and actually, I had never cut a feature, but not to brag or anything, but I was a really good editor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just had a real knack for it. A
Mm-hmm.
they're films that a film editor directed, but I think you can kind of tell. That they're really, whatever else you may think of them, they're really well paced,
Mm-hmm.
and they have all that. And so I actually I had written the script for Alone in the Dark,
Mm-hmm.
and New Line was unable to raise the money, and I got a call to show up to interview for the job to cut The Burning, and I went in and I had the interview, and they said, "Okay, we'll hire you." So I was kind of, "Okay, sure, that sounds like fun." So that's what happened, and I went on location, and actually, I learned a lot from working on that film. I learned a lot about how to create a scare, and how to how to build a scare, and all that kind of stuff. And in fact, I went back and I rewrote the script for Alone in the Dark because I thought that I could make it scarier.
Mm-hmm.
And New Line was then able to raise the money. I don't know whether they were able to raise the money because the script was scarier, or just the right time. But
Mm-hmm.
but I did think that I had definitely improved the script, based on what I learned from cutting The Burning.
Mm-hmm. And that was Harvey Weinstein's first movie as a producer, ironically.
Excuse me?
The Burning was Harvey Weinstein's first movie as a producer.
That is correct. Yeah, I mean, basically, he and his brother Bobby were in the music promotion business.
Mm-hmm.
That they've been doing in college, and they'd always wanted to get into film. So, I mean, basically, they came up with this script that wasn't terribly original.
Mm-hmm.
A killer in a summer camp.
Yeah.
No one had ever thought of that idea before. But I have to say, I mean, Harvey particularly really did have an instinct for movies. I mean, when I was doing the editing, I don't know, have you seen the movie?
I saw it once many years ago.
Yeah, so there's a scene where I guess it's kind of the scene that you see most excerpted, where they're on this raft in the lake, and there's a canoe that's just floating with nobody in it, and they're all sort of like, "Hey, let's paddle to the canoe," and so I edited the thing together, and Harvey said it's too short. They get to the raft too soon.
Mm-hmm.
Can you make it longer? So I said, "Oh, all right." I went back and I took all the footage I thought worked, and I put it in and screened it again for them. And he said, "It's still too short." And I said, "Well, I used everything that I thought was any good." And he said, "Well, use everything that we have." So I went back and I took literally just about every shot that they had, and I made it longer, and that's kind of what suspense is all about. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows something terrible is going to happen. If they're not sure, the music is telling them anyway, and when you've got somebody in that situation, you can milk it for all it's worth. You can just keep it going, as long as you want. And so he had that instinct to know that it ought to be longer. He just kind of sensed that. So yes, and I mean, he was not Harvey was not the most pleasant person in the world, but he was always sort of very passionate about film. and I was at a film festival in Germany several years later, and the head of the festival said, "You really got to see this film, My Left Foot." If you remember that.
Yeah.
And it just blew me away. I thought, wow, what a great movie. And wondering if anybody was going to see it, and then finding out that Harvey had bought the American rights to the film, and he promoted the hell out of it, which was what he was so good at, and it ended up making a lot of money, getting seen, getting nominations and stuff like that, and so I really admired what he had done to promote that film, because he was passionate about the film, and he wanted everybody else to see it, he wanted everybody else to feel about it the way, he had felt about it, so.
So you take Alone in the Dark to New Line, and New Line was pretty new at that time.
Well, actually, they weren't new, but they were not producing films. They were a distributor.
Yeah.
And they had really they weren't making movies. They were basically buying movies that were already made, and so that was around the time that Friday the 13th had recently come out. Halloween had come out a few years earlier, and all these movies were making a lot of money, and so they said, gee, if we can make a low budget horror film, we can make a lot of money because we really understand this market, and so I came up with this idea, which became Alone in the Dark, and they said, okay, we'll pay you to write the script, not very much, but we'll pay you to write the script, and if the movie gets made, you can direct it. I mean, I had directed a bunch of shorts, and they'd won awards and all that kind of stuff, so they knew that I was a reasonably good director, and also I had done a lot of editing work for them. I cut all their trailers, and I just knew I met Bob Shea, when his company was really just getting started, and we became really good friends, and he trusted me, and also, a lot of people around that time in the early 80s were directing these horror films, and they really didn't know anything about how to make a film, and you'd hear these stories where they would get into the editing room, and they literally didn't have enough material to make the scenes work because the director had such a bad understanding of how to make a movie that they didn't get all the shots that they needed, and so he Bob used to say, well, at least I know that you'll get all the pieces, so whether all the pieces would be any good, that's another story, but but at least I'd get all the pieces, and they could put it together, and stick it on a screen somewhere. So, and that was, I think, part of the motivation.
Yeah, you got to work with some legends in this movie too. Jack Palance, Donald Pleasence, Martin Landau. What was that like?
It was pretty awesome to be able to work with those guys. Actually, the one I was the most excited about working with was Donald Pleasence. Thought, he had been in a lot of, a lot of fans know him from Halloween, but he'd been in a huge number of really fantastic movies. He'd worked with some of the best directors, worked with Polanski, and worked with all sorts of amazing directors. And Joseph Losey, he'd done a lot of Harold Pinter stuff, and I thought he was
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
chain, and um, but he was kind of intimidating,
Yeah.
to say the least. And he definitely tried to intimidate me, but uh, but it was a great experience. I mean, working with him, I he, I mean, without saying I'm going to teach you something, he taught me stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just learn stuff. He kind of had a sly way about him where he would for instance, we'd be working, and we're like, desperately trying to get the shot, and everybody's running around and rushing, and the camera's set up, and we're about to shoot his scene, and just as we're about to roll the camera, he'd say, I remember when I was working with the great George Stevens, and
Yeah.
everybody would just stop, and wait for him to tell his story,
Mm-hmm.
And he said, when I shot with George Stevens, he had like this little console next to his director's chair, and whenever we were doing a scene, he would, and here we're like trying to rush to get, let's get the shot, and he said, George Stevens, he would just, when everything was ready, he'd wait for everybody to get really quiet, and then he'd just slowly turn up the music, and let the mood of the music come in, and then at a certain point he'd say, action, and it was his way of telling me to slow down.
Wow.
But I mean, he could bust my chops, but there were a few times when everything just went completely horribly wrong, and as things are wont to do when you do a movie.
Mm-hmm.
But we were shooting a lot of nights, alone in the dark, and it was my first feature. It was totally exhausting, and I don't know. There was one night when I really just hit rock bottom. My brain just froze. A whole bunch of bad things happened, and I was so tired that I just didn't know what to do. And we had kind of disagreed about how to do a particular scene, and Landau had intervened finally and said, just do it the way the kid wants it, and Palance did, and so I walked into the room where he and Landau and these other actors were standing, and I said, "Listen, guys, I just have to tell you that there's a little bit of a hold up here. We lost these actors that I needed to do this scene, and I just don't quite know what to do, and
Mm-hmm.
but I'll figure something out. So just hang on." And as I was walking out of the room,
Mm-hmm.
he said, "Jack," I said, "What?" He said, "Remember that scene the other day that you and I disagreed about, and we ended up doing it your way?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You were right.
Uh-huh.
You didn't have to do that, but he could tell that that's what I needed. So he was really nice about it."
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So how did Nightmare on Elm Street 2 come to you?
Well, Wes was supposed to direct it, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
but he didn't write the script. They hired a guy who worked at New Line,
Mm-hmm.
Dave Chaskin, who's a pretty good writer, but he wasn't a full-time writer. He was on were not a big deal like they are now. You
Right.
know, I mean, now you expect the sequel's going to be bigger and better than the original, but at that time, basically the sequel was a way to squeeze a little bit more money out of the title, and it wasn't, no one expected it was going to be anywhere near as good as the original. And I guess, Wes figured, well, his career was going pretty well at that point, and he probably figured, what do I need this for? When other people are asking me to do stuff, and why should I make a sequel to a film that's already successful that I don't really believe in?
Mm-hmm.
So he backed out. And so, because of my long association with New Line, and I'd kind of been involved vaguely with Elm Street. I mean, I'd read like some early drafts of it. Bob always used to like to ask my opinion. He had a few people that he would always try to sound out his ideas before he decided what to do, because he had realized that he wasn't always right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were a few times when as a distributor, there was a particular film that he didn't want to distribute, and because he didn't like the film, and the film went on to make and somebody said, no, you gotta distribute this film, and the film would go on and make a lot of money. And so he realized that he wasn't always right. And so anyway, so I had read early drafts of the thing. I wasn't really involved in the editing, but I helped out a little bit with the editing. So I was very, very familiar with it, and he trusted me, and so he asked me if I would do it. And my first reaction was to say no, actually, because it was never my goal to direct horror films. My goal was to be Jean Renoir or Fellini or Truffaut or somebody like that, and especially I didn't want to be the guy who does sequels to horror films. And a friend of mine who was in the industry said, listen, the film's going to make a lot of money, and you'll have a directing career. And he was right. The film opened. It was the top grossing film of the week, and the phone started ringing, and I made another 14, 13 movies. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I really like in the second one. I like Frey's line, "I got the body, you got the brain."
Yeah. No, I mean,
Yeah.
I tend to get very involved with the script of films I'm working on. What my agent used to refer to as directing on the page, but kind of saying, well, here's how I see the film. Here's what I think this film is about, and here's some changes that I think we have to make to get this thing to work right. And with Elm Street, I mean, basically, I had 6 weeks before they were going to start shooting the film, and I had no idea what to do. It was kind of terrifying, and so I was just trying to keep my head above water and to figure out how the hell I'm going to get this thing made. It looked like it was just so difficult that it was almost impossible, and so that was where all of my concentration went. And so I pretty much shot the script that I was given. I mean, that was kind of the job,
Mm-hmm.
And so I will take credit for doing what I think is a very good job directing the film.
Mm-hmm.
But
I've met Mark. He's a great guy. I'm sure he was great to work with. But what
Who?
Mark Patton?
Yeah.
Hmm. What was Clu Gulager like?
Oh, he was a pleasure. I mean, Mark, Mark was, Mark was, he was having a hard time with the film, as I'm sure you know.
Hmm.
You know what was going on with him. I had no idea.
Yeah.
You know, he just seemed to always be like a little out of sorts, and I didn't quite know why. I thought, maybe it had something to do with the fact that he was playing a very troubled character.
Hmm.
I just assumed that he was, that was sort of affecting his general mentality. And I mean, he and I had a very good professional relationship.
Hmm.
That's really what it was. I mean, we didn't socialize. We didn't really stay in touch after the film was done. Um, he had a hard role to play. Crew was great. I mean, he was a lot of fun. And I cast him again in the Hidden. Just because I wanted to have him around because he was a lot of fun.
Hmm.
He's how old he is? He's pushing 90, and he's still a lot of fun. He's a pretty wild guy. He has a pretty odd sense of humor, and
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know whether you've ever met him, but he's a bit of a character.
Never met him, but I've interviewed a lot of people who've worked with him, and they just absolutely are in awe of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful guy, and I'm a huge fan of Clues. I mean, I've been fortunate to work with some really good people, and Clue is definitely falls in that category.
Hmm. Certainly. And then you did the Hidden, and it's funny. I found out that Jim Quoth had wrote the movie because I think Jim Quoth is one of the most underrated comedy screenwriters of the '80s. And
Yeah, he's a fantastic writer. I mean,
yeah,
the script was a brilliant script. It was a fantastic script. I read the script and I said, I got to make this movie. Whatever it takes, I got to make this movie. And so um, um, I told New Line, that I really wanted to do it. They actually had another director who was attached to the film, um, uh, and honestly, uh, they made a very smart choice by hiring me because I made a much better film than he would have ever made. But um, yeah, I mean that was one that I just knew it was going to be good. I just had such a really sort of visceral connection to it. And, that's really important to have.
hmm yeah, it's a good movie. You got Tom McLaughlin, who was coming off of Dune at the time, and Twin Peaks hadn't started yet.
Right.
And you got some great character actors in it, like
Yeah.
Chris Mulkey and Larry Cedar and Edo Ross. I mean,
Right.
that's an
Right.
amazing cast.
Yeah. No, it was a great cast. Yeah. Yeah. Edo Ross was kind of pretty new then.
Hmm.
At that point. In fact, there's a kind of a funny story. He's a little bit of a hot shot, and we were filming in Beverly Hills. We were filming this scene right at the opening of the movie. it's actually the first time that we see him and Michael Nouri, and they're interviewing this guy about about the guy who's driving the Ferrari. You know, he said, "Oh, real nice guy. Never made any trouble. What did he do? Rob a bank?" and then it turns out that he's we've just seen him rob a bank, and then they get a call and said they found this guy. You know, let's get out of here. And so they jump into the car, and Ed's driving the car, and he floors the gas. Well, anyway, we're shooting in Beverly Hills, and when you shoot in L.A., you use these off-duty cops, and there are these sort of syndicates or societies. I don't know exactly what you would call them, but there are these various groups of these cops. Some of them are off duty, some of them were retired. You know, that would close down the streets, and
right.
they all had motorcycles. You know, if you were doing driving stuff, they would close down the cross streets, and they would, and also, you know, it was their job to enforce all of the laws of the city to make sure that the film company didn't do that. But they would cut you some slack. So, like, you know, you're only supposed to close the street for, like, you know, 3 minutes. But, you know, if you had a long take and you're having a hard time, they keep it closed for another couple of minutes, or, you know, stuff like that. But when you shoot in Beverly Hills, you have to hire on-duty policemen who are being paid by the city of Beverly Hills. And the city of Beverly Hills isn't particularly anxious to have filming done there, but they sort of tolerate it. And so you get these cops who are not inclined to be helpful to you, to say the very least.
Yeah.
And so Ed, you know, runs the car, and Nouri jumps in, and he stomps on the gas and lays down rubber, and the car takes off, cut. And then one of the cops says, if that actor does that again, if he lays down rubber again, we're shutting down the film. That'll be the end. It'll be the last shot that you do in Beverly Hills. And so I say to Ed, don't do that again. And all right. And so we do another take, and he's okay. And then we do one more take, and he jumps in the car and he floors it again. And the cops shut us down. Fortunately, we had got everything that we needed. So, you know, it wasn't like we were halfway through the scene. And he not only did he shut us down, but he gave Ed a ticket for laying down rubber while we're shooting the movie, you know, with the camera rolling. So, and he actually went to court and fought the ticket, and the judge sort of laughed and let it go.
Oh man. Then you shifted away from horror to do this one movie I really like called Renegades.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, that was like your first like major studio film, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had really wanted to get away from doing horror films, and I always loved thrillers. I mean, that was a genre that I really appreciated, and I was sort of well suited to it because, again, a lot of you know, thriller has to do with, you know, pacing and everything, and you know, sort of ratcheting up the tension, and you know, that was something that I felt that I was good at, and yeah, and I was holding out to try to do some other movies. I had actually wanted to direct Ghost. I was sort of up for directing Ghost.
Oh.
Which I really wanted to do, and
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, and so the chance to do Renegades came up, and there were a lot of things that were very attractive about it,
Mm-hmm.
and it was Kiefer and Lou Diamond, and they were kind of hot. It seemed like a kind of a fun script. So so I signed on to do it. That was my first real kind of studio film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kiefer and Lou Diamond Phillips had both done Young Guns,
Right.
and Jamie Gertz had done The Lost Boys with Kiefer. So they were comfortable all working with each other. It seemed like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they, the idea was that these were sort of the new Hollywood people, if you will.
Yeah.
So I kind of have mixed feelings about that. I was pretty hot coming off of Elm Street made a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a great movie, but it made a lot of money, and that means a lot in L.A. But everybody loved the hit.
Mm-hmm.
Really had really good word of mouth. So and did Renegades, tested pretty well. We thought it would do well, and I remember that I was in a movie theater and I was watching the previews, and trying to remember what the big movies were that summer. But I mean, there were some big blockbuster movies. There was like a sequel or two,
Mm-hmm.
and they were playing the trailers, and the audience was like going crazy over all of these trailers. And then the Renegades trailer came up, and the audience just like quieted down. And I thought, oh fuck, this is not good. This is not a good time to be opening this movie,
Mm-hmm.
And the movie did not open that well, and it kind of slowed things down for my career.
Mm-hmm. Last night I watched that episode you did of Tales from the Crypt.
Oh yeah, that was one of the more fun things I've done. That was just a blast to do.
Yeah, Moses Gunn, Teddy Wilson. Yeah, they must have been great.
Yeah. I mean, what happened was they had a script, and they felt that the script wasn't working,
Mm-hmm.
which it wasn't. The script actually wasn't very good,
Mm-hmm.
perfectly honest. And the script was written by some guy too. Joel Silver was kind of big on, but
Mm-hmm.
and so we went back to the original comic book, and I thought that funeral homes are like a really big deal in African American neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
Like a funeral director is a fairly important person in the community, highly respected. And I thought it would be good to set the thing in an African American funeral home. And so I made that suggestion, and they said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, sure. And so they hired this young writer who was Don Mancini.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether you picked up on.
I know the name. Yeah.
Don wrote all the Chucky movies.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So they hired Don, and he rewrote the script, and basically, as long as I didn't go over schedule and over budget,
Mm-hmm.
Nobody bothered me, and so uh, and it was really great because a lot of those actors, uh, they all knew each other. A lot of them had worked together, and so it was a very sort of congenial set. And Moses was having a pretty good time, and so yeah, so it was just like a fun set to be around. In fact, and I mean, while I sort of resisted being a horror film director on a certain level,
Mm-hmm.
it sort of clicked with my personality because I've always been a person who's sort of marched to a different drummer, if you will.
Yeah.
I'm like the kind of person who laughs inappropriately,
Yeah.
and horror films are basically inappropriate.
Yes.
And I remember my wife came to the set. We were shooting. It was a former pasta factory in L.A. that they had taken this place and sort of turned it into a studio to shoot these films. And we were looking at the dailies for the scene where he's teaching his nephew how to drain the blood out of the corpses.
Mm-hmm.
And I had wanted the embalming room to just be like the most disgusting place that you could imagine. I mean, we actually went and visited a funeral home in South Central LA, and it was not a pleasant place to be. And the smell of formaldehyde was kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
So that sort of became our template for what this thing should look like. It was, the guy's a miser, so it's like
Yeah.
he doesn't spend money on anything, and so we were shooting the scene where the blood was being drained out of the corpse,
Mm-hmm.
and so the next day, usually you would watch the dailies during lunch. So my wife came down around lunchtime, and we're sitting there having lunch, watching this footage of the blood being drained out of this corpse, and I was kind of laughing maniacally because I thought it was so funny. And my wife, I think she thought maybe I should rethink this marriage.
Yeah. And then a couple of years later, you did a reboot of The Omen.
Well, yes and no. It was called The Omen.
Mm-hmm.
Dick Donner was the executive producer, but
Mm-hmm.
it really was not. Really, actually, what it was, believe it or not, was kind of a ripoff of The Hidden. It was about this thing that was called the entity that jumps from body to body.
Right.
So it actually had very little to do with the movie The Omen,
Mm-hmm.
which Donner had of course directed.
Yep.
And it was a singularly unpleasant experience.
Oh. Yeah, I never saw it, so I was curious.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is that if you shoot a pilot,
Mm-hmm.
if the pilot gets picked up, everybody makes a ton of money.
Mm-hmm.
If the pilot doesn't get picked up, nobody makes anything. It never gets seen. It's just, depressing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was an enormous amount of pressure to for this thing to be a success, and there was a huge amount of political infighting. The writer was the executive producer, and they fired him, and
Mm-hmm.
Which they couldn't do, and he had a very powerful agent, and things got really really ugly, um, and end of the day, it never got picked up. So
That's a shame.
yeah, and it was pretty good, I thought. But anyway.
So, did you retire from the business?
Well, what I did was in 2005, I took a job to start a film program at a university in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Things had kind of been slowing down, and I was getting kind of, a bit fed up with the whole lifestyle, and I got offered a chance to start a film program. I always thought that film school was basically a waste of time.
Yeah.
Partly because I hadn't gone there, and I felt, a lot of these film schools, people were taught, students were taught by people who really had never worked in the industry, and
Yeah.
so, how are they really going to learn that they really needed to speak to people who had actually done it for a living? So when I got this offer, I thought, well, it's kind of intriguing, and I talked it over with my wife, and we decided to give it a shot. So we moved to North Carolina, and that's what I did for the next 14 years. I started the film program. I had no idea how to teach film. I had never studied it, so I really didn't know how it was taught.
Mm-hmm.
I just learned it by doing it. So a lot of it was having to kind of figure out why I did what I did. Because I kind of done it instinctively. This is just put the camera here because that's the right place to put it. But why is it the right place? Why put it there? Why not put it somewhere else?
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, it was kind of interesting because I had to basically spend the next. I was there for 14 years. Basically, spend the next 14 years thinking about what I'd done for the previous 35 years. How I had done what I had done. So it was kind of interesting. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually I got to be, I think, a pretty good teacher. So I'm hoping I'll get a chance to make another movie. I'm trying to put a movie together now, and find out whether it's made me a better director or a worse director. Now that I know,
Yeah.
the rules, so to speak.
Yeah. Do you ever get invited to sign at conventions?
Yeah. I've done a bunch of them. It's kind of fun. I mean, I had gone to some of these conventions just as a guest.
Mm-hmm.
Not to sign anything.
Yeah.
But well, you had mentioned that Tim Timpone.
Yeah. Tony Timpone. Yeah.
Tony Timpone. I mean, and yeah, they used to have one that probably still do. That's in Pasadena, I think.
Oh, Musterpalooza.
Yeah, that's probably it. But Tony invited me there a few times to be like on a panel,
Mm-hmm.
and that was about it. But I had never thought about doing it. It seemed like, I don't know. There were all of these people who sort of had these kind of sketchy careers, and they're
Mm-hmm.
they're now trying to sort of cash in by signing autographs and all that. But
Yeah.
a few years ago, it was was I guess the 30th anniversary of Elm Street, and so I got invited to do one, and I thought, why not? And it was actually great because I got to, I hadn't seen Mark Patton since we wrapped the film. Since the cast and crew screening, I guess was probably the last time that I had seen him, and so we got reacquainted, and I kind of heard his side of what was going on, which was very different from what was going on for me.
Mm-hmm.
We were both trying to survive in our own ways. The film, but he actually quit the business as a result of that, and it was this really dramatic experience. It was part of his life. For me, it was a stepping stone to a career as a film director. And I was able to work for the next 20 years or so directing movies, which is pretty good thing. So
Yeah.
So it was fun in that respect, and it was also, it was great to meet the fans. I mean, I wanted to make movies because I would see movies, and as as a film buff, when you see a movie that's really good, it kind of changes your life, and you walk out of the theater, like a different person than the one who came in,
Of course.
And I was hoping that I might be able to make some movies that would make people feel that way, and so it was nice to meet fans and see that, hey, I actually had, it turned out pretty well. I mean, I still do the occasional one. I mean, they're usually more interested in the actors anyway,
Yeah.
than the director. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of fun. I still have somewhat mixed feelings about it, but it's fun, and I get to make a little bit of money. I get to meet the fans. I get to travel. So it's not bad.
Yeah, I think you got a pretty good deal. You've certainly made some cult classics, out of your career, and I hope you get to make another one eventually. And I hope I get to meet you at a convention too.
I hope so. You live in L.A.
I live
or nearby.
I live in Redding, California at the moment. I'm originally from San Francisco, and I go back and forth from here to San Francisco to L.A. a lot.
Oh.
Yeah. But
yeah. So this is a podcast that we're doing.
Yes, it's a podcast that I do in my home.
And so I assume that you've been recording.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, send me a link when you have the podcast.
Oh yeah, this will be finished by later in the evening and stuff.
Oh.
I got to edit.
Yeah.
I got to edit some silence that I had in the beginning, waiting for the call and everything. But it'll all be done by later in the night.
Okay. Well, good. Well, good luck with the editing, and yeah, send me a link.
Absolutely, Jack.
I hope that I do get to meet you sometime.
Yes, it's been an honor. I appreciate so much you taking the time on Halloween night to do this.
Right. Well, now I have to go out and get my Freddy glove and terrorize the neighborhood.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, and you have a great night.
Okay, thank you, and same to you. I hope that your
It sure is. It sure is.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Jack Shoulder. Ain't he a cool dude? Thank you so much, Jack. I really appreciate all your stories about the horror industry and movie making. It's just so awesome. I hope you make another movie, and I hope I get to meet you at a convention. If you like this video, everyone, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Add me as a friend on Facebook. Join my Tommy Kovac comedian page on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram and all that fun stuff. Well, that's all the time we have this week on Splat from the Past. Until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying there's no shame in living in the past because the present sucks. Thank you, everyone, for Halloween October, and later, dudes.